Hi, I'm Andrew, and I'm doing my presentation on how does power overcome one's individuality and ability to make decisions. Next slide. So I did my research on the Zimbardo's Stanford experiment, and this is a little description about it. Dr. Phil Zimbardo, who's a professor at Stanford, put out in a newspaper uh, an advertisement for civilians and students that go to Stanford to be paid and be a part of this experiment, and they were to be paid $15 an hour, $15 a day for 1 to 2 weeks. And so a bunch of the college students applied, and he had a group of his colleagues interview and assess each and every one of them, and he asked them simple questions about their life and their daytime, what they do during the day. And he asked them all at the end, would they rather be a prisoner or a guard? And they all said prisoner because they believe everyone hates guards. And so then after he told them that they used assessments and interviews to split them up into guard or prisoner groups, but they actually flipped a coin to decide which group they were put in. And so what ended up happening by the first night of the experiment, the guards started taking too much power from from what they were being. So they were being too harsh at being guards, and they were doing things that were illegal in the contract, such as touching or beating the prisoners. And Phil saw this all through cameras put throughout the prison, and so he knew that there was something wrong, but he didn't stop it. He waited till it was mandatory for them to stop something. And many of the prisoners lost who they really were, and they gave up. They couldn't do it anymore, and forced Margot to try and let them leave. But he forced them to stay and told them that it wasn't an experiment anymore and it was real life. And the civilians they didn't know what to do anymore, both guards and prisoners, and they turned insane. Next slide. So here are some pictures from the movie, because they're the only real picture is the one down here, and it shows right here in this picture how aggressive the guards were to the prisoners when in the contract it didn't allow them to do that. And here it's a picture of a prisoner with a bag over his head, which is not something that they should be doing or normal. And this is an actual picture from the experiment. Next slide. So I made it relevant to the Holocaust. And so how it was relevant is they were both very cruel to the prisoners, or in the Holocaust, the Jews. And the power from the leaders that gave them an incentive was very similar, because the guards were allowed to go home and rest, while the prisoners had to stay. And it's the guards, the German soldiers, they were being told that if they get rid of the Jews and everything and take care of everything, that their lives in Germany will be better. There's also a lot of group pressure, because if you read in the research, many of the guards were scared of doing what the other guards were doing, and they didn't enjoy doing it, and were telling the harsh guards to stop, and they didn't want to join, but then they ended up also joining them and doing bad things to the prisoners. And it's also similar because both in the Holocaust and in the experiment, the prisoners or the Jews were given numbers and not names, and they were allowed to be called by their names. And lastly, how it was relevant was that they were both stripped of their individuality, and many of the prisoners didn't know who they really were, just like the Jews lost who they really were. Thank you.